Thank you so much for joining us on another amazing episode of the Bioenergetics Beat. I'm Heather Gray, a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and certified bioenergetic practitioner. On this episode today is brought to you today by Nikki, Unleash the Wellness Within. It's a non-invasive, easily affordable, and highly effective approach to optimize wellness. It's a wearable device that puts frequency better based life in your hands and on your wrist. Make sure to stick around to the very end because we always have an awesome giveaway. You're not going to want to miss any minute of what this amazing man has to say anyway, but just as an added bonus, we've got some fun giveaways for you at the end of the show. And without further ado, today's special guest is Fred Diamond. Yay, welcome Fred.
Hi, Heather. Excited to be here.
Yay. And he wrote an awesome book, Love, Hope, Lyme. I always want to say and there's no and. Love, Hope, Lyme, right? Just to the point. And it is a different perspective when it comes to the Lyme disease world. You know, he's talking more of the part of the caregiver. And so Fred's got a really beautiful story to share. And, I think it's kind of beautiful too today that we're speaking on Valentine's Day.
Mm.
This won't come out though until May for Lyme Awareness Month, but it's a sad story. It's a beautiful story, but it's a story that needed to be told. And thank you, Fred, for doing that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you kind of got into the Lyme world?
Heather, it's great to see you again. I'm excited to be on the show, and I'm excited that this show is being posted during Lyme Awareness Month, and it's great. And I'm also excited that we're recording this on Valentine's Day. So, in the summer of 2021, someone in my life with chronic Lyme disease uh, decided they needed to focus 100% on their recovery. So I decided to become an expert on Lyme disease to understand more about this disease, how it affects people, how it affects people in your life, your spouse, your partner, your children, your sister-in-law, whoever it might be, friend. And part of the reason for that is when I decided to really get deep into understanding this disease, which I thought prior to this journey, if you will, was really about fatigue, maybe stress. I didn't realize all the ramifications that Lyme disease brings to people who are bitten by a tick and get to the chronic stage, and it affects so many parts of the body. So I dug in deep, and I began to realize that relationships fell apart, because of this disease and the stress that's on it, and things like the fatigue, and that can't it inhibits you from working jobs. And I just found out the disease just broke down livelihoods, families, and relationships. And I read a stat during the research that something like 75% of the relationships, the committed relationships, will terminate. Typically it's by the spouse who says, I didn't buy off on this, you can't work, this isn't what we said we were going to do, and it just gets too much for them. On the other hand, this was my situation, where the particular person that I was in a relationship with said that she just needed to focus exclusively on her recovery. And I just dug in deep. I met people like you, thousands of people around the globe. I published my book in the summer of July of 2022. I also do a complimentary podcast called the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast, of which you were a guest on. And we're way over 10,000 downloads on that particular show. It's a global phenomenon. I met somebody yesterday in Dubai, Heather, in Dubai, who was
I
bitten
want to
by a
go to
tick.
Dubai.
It's a lot of fun. Just be careful of the ticks. Yeah, someone reached out to me and said, I've been following you, and someone I know just got Lyme disease, and they found a tick that was transmitted, they believe, by a pigeon, right? So birds, people say, oh, Lyme disease, it's primarily in the New England area. It's all over the place now. Birds will transmit ticks. So it is truly a global epidemic.
It's crazy to me how there's still so much what's the word I'm looking for? Put your head in the sand,
Mm.
it's not in California, only out. It's like animals migrate, people. It's not just deer, it's birds, it's mice, it's, I've seen on snakes, anything, and all these little critters, they migrate. So people migrate, right? Like how many stowaways do you think probably hitched a
Mm.
ride to Dubai? Like I want to hitch a ride to Dubai.
Dubai is a cool place. Yeah, there's a documentary that you and I are both familiar with called The Quiet Epidemic, which does an amazing job talking about why a lot of people have put their head in the sand as it relates to this disease. And in the very, very beginning, the opening shots, they show people finding birds all over the country. This was primarily the United States, all over the country with ticks attached to them. And like you just said, it gets transmitted. I've met people obviously in Colorado, we are people in Southern California, people in Northern California. I did some book signings the summer of 2023, all through Texas, where I met people in Dallas and Houston and San Antonio and Austin, all who were struggling with Lyme disease. So it's out there. The average, the average tick transmits not just Lyme disease, but potentially as many as 24 other what they call co-infections. So it really is a horrible disease, and I'm excited to see that the device that you're focusing on the show can provide some solace to people and some relief from the pain that they experience.
Absolutely. So what were some of the symptoms that your loved one was experiencing when it came to the Lyme disease, and how long did she have it before she decided that she needed to focus solely on her recovery?
Yeah, I've met people who've had Lyme disease for decades. And one of the problems is you might get bitten and then you don't know what the problem is. And a lot of doctors are ignorant on Lyme disease. And maybe you go to your primary care and let's say you have some joint pain. So they'll think maybe it's arthritis. So a lot of times people are wrongly diagnosed with arthritis when it's the Lyme. A lot of times people will get bitten and then maybe as maybe they're bitten as a teenager or as a someone in their early teens, then they go to college and they can't study, they can't focus because now the added stress of being in a college environment
And
causes
the
the
mold in the dorms, that's a huge
that's
thing,
a big
right?
one too. Mold
Gosh.
is it's another, we could talk for hours about mold.
Yeah.
um, and then the stress of the fatigue and the stress of the anxiety. Why am I not getting better? One of the classic Lyme books was written by a guy named Dr. Richard Horowitz, one of the foremost Lyme literate medical doctors on the planet, who actually wrote the foreword to my book. He
He's
wrote a
been
book.
on this show.
He's been on your show.
Yeah.
He wrote a book called How Can I Get Better? If you have this disease, you may be struggling for decades because you maybe keep going to doctors who don't know what's wrong with you and they keep diagnosing the wrong thing. And then, as you get to the final doctor who says, you know what, we've tested you for everything. And by the way, asterisk, it's very, very difficult to test for Lyme. The diagnostics are not there, they're horrible. So there's a lot of research being done to improve the diagnostics, especially at the chronic stage. Then you get to the final doctor who says, well, we've tested for everything. It's probably in your head. Maybe you should go spend some time in the psych ward. And then you're sitting with your spouse or your family member who said, well, my friend or my sister or my cousin or my brother, whoever it might be, or my wife or whomever, my mother, well, the doctor just said it's in your head. So he's the doctor. So it's probably in your head. Meanwhile, you wake up every day in pain. You wake up every day with joint pain. You wake up every day with headaches, with neck pain, with unbearable anxiety. So Dr. Horowitz, who I just alluded to, told me that someone came to him after having seen 100 doctors. It's probably a lot, but I've heard of people who've seen dozens, and it wasn't until someone said, you know what, I think this might be Lyme disease, even though the test doesn't show properly because the tests aren't that great either. I think we might have Lyme disease. Let's start treating it.
Absolutely. I know that was my story. It was 27 years of
Mhm.
undiagnosed. And I probably only saw 20 practitioners before I got an answer. And it was funny. It only took her 5 minutes to diagnose me. And I thought she was, full of crap because I had been doing this for so long and nobody believing me. And I was one that ended up, my husband divorced me, shortly after getting the diagnosis and going through that. So definitely, not special here. Like, how many of you can relate to a very similar story of being told that it's all in your head, your lab results look normal, it's very, very common. This is a great little spot. We're going to pause for commercial, but again, don't go anywhere because you want to stick to the end to see what we're giving away. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Nikki plus Lyme is the next generation of Wave 1 technology referred to in this testimonial.
It's the Wave device. Have you been able to get back to yoga?
I have, yes. Not even just teaching, but like my own practice. That was I remember so clearly. I went to a class last year and I wasn't even able to do like a basic pose because my body was in so much pain. And that's not something I've ever experienced before. I'm sorry, I'm getting like really emotional thinking about this. But it is really hard to have things that like you almost take for granted in your daily life and then suddenly to just completely lose the ability to have those things anymore. So it almost in a way is like there are silver linings to everything, and that is a silver lining, is just like being grateful for so many of the basic things that we often don't even give a second thought to. So short answer, yes.
Nikki puts a personal wellness center in your hands and on your wrist. Be better, do better. WeAreNikki.com.
Yay, welcome back. Woohoo. Man, that was a lot on the first, but how many people can relate to the stories that, that Fred was talking about? It's very, very common. And sadly, still a lot of medical gaslighting going on, a lot of ignorance in the medical community, with family, with spouses, with friends. Like it can be a very isolating and hard, complex, chronic, controversial, right? The 3 C's. To disease to have. So, I love what you're doing for folks, because there's, like I said, not a whole lot of people out there speaking about what it's like to be a caregiver or a family member of somebody with Lyme. So let's dive deeper into your book, shall we?
Yes.
I guess, so I asked you before, how long did your friend have the disease before you guys figured out that she was sick?
This particular person knew relatively quickly, but it took her a long time to get diagnosed with Lyme disease. And I've heard that so many times. You're talking about things like gaslighting. Uh, we're 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 raised to trust our doctors, right? When you're a child, you have a cold, you have the flu, you go to the doctor. The doctor cures you. With a mysterious disease like Lyme disease, it shows up as different things. There's a term called Lyme literate medical doctor, LLMD, which is someone who's been certified to be a little more knowledgeable, if you will. There aren't that many doctors, Heather, who devote their entire practice to Lyme disease. Yet it is one of the growing diseases out there. Ticks because of global warming and because of climate change and because of winters getting shorter and the migration, like we just talked about. Most people, or I should say a lot of people, get their Lyme disease from a tick that jumps off of a deer or of a mouse or something along those lines. And then, the tick attaches to them either via a hike or a walk, or it could just be anywhere in their backyard, sleeping with the dog. Heather, one thing I tell people now is don't sleep with your pets. You hear about this, even though there are treatments for pets, which is crazy. There are ways to cure pets from tick bites. But the pet comes in, sleeps in your bed, ticks jump off, jumps onto you. I've heard that so many times.
Mm.
So I tell people that. But yeah, we're raised to trust our doctors, and the doctors have to have the confidence that they know what they're doing. But most doctors know what they know. They know what things look like. Lyme, chronic Lyme has been dismissed for so long, even by places like the CDC, right? The Centers for Disease Control. Many people with chronic Lyme despise the CDC because they still don't admit. They did a slight change to their website at the end of 2023 to acknowledge that there may be something up with certain chronic situations like Lyme, but they still call it post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome as compared to chronic Lyme. So it's just a horrible situation. So we're trying to just bring some peace to a community that needs it.
Absolutely. And even with the blessings of our LLMDs, there's still a huge part to the healing puzzle that a lot of those folks will miss if they're
Yes.
not addressing lifestyle, mindset, nervous system, detoxifications. Doctors have their specific, what they've learned in doctor school. And sadly, I've talked to many of them and they say they get 8 hours tops, of nutrition, right? Which should be the foundation of a human health model, right? What we put in our mouth. So sometimes it takes a village, and that's part of the reason why I became the practitioner I became, is because the regular, model wasn't working for me. Especially folks that have been sick for decades. You no longer have the critter to deal with, but you have all the byproduct, the effects of them shutting things down and causing inflammation and just the damage, just the collateral damage, right? So what are some of the nuggets that you like to share with folks who are supporting somebody with Lyme disease?
Yeah, it was funny when I interviewed Dr. Horowitz, I said to him, what's the one thing you want people to know? And he said, I want them to know that this is a real disease. So, uh, I thought that the only thing that you really needed to do was keep your loved ones out of stress and know where the best gluten-free pizza is, right? Because most people, you talk about health, and you're one of the foremost experts that I've met on everything related to nutrition and healing the gut, and why you should eat certain foods and why you should avoid certain foods, and clean eating and things related to that. But first and foremost, it's real. It's not psychosomatic. It's not in their head, even though you may have gone to 10, 15 doctors who said, we can't find anything wrong with you. As a matter of fact, a lot of people with chronic Lyme disease aren't fans of infectious disease doctors. And, the
He's
ILSA,
speaking the truth.
the IDSA, they hold their position. And I wanted to understand, why did they dispute that there's such a thing called chronic Lyme? And I met a infectious disease doctor, and I was excited. It was a session actually on healthy eating. So this infectious disease doctor was giving a talk on healthy eating, and it was really well done. It was a great presentation. I went up to this doctor afterwards and I said, this was a great presentation. Can I talk to you about chronic Lyme disease? And she shook her head. She said, I know there's people who probably have some problems after the 28 days of doxycycline, which is the recommended path that the CDC says you should take. She said, but you know what? We just don't know what to do. And I was like, oh, okay. She said, I know there are people who struggle, the people for decades who struggle. She said, but we just don't know what to do. This is a disease that it really doesn't have a cure. I mean, there's ways you can get into remission. And I know you've gone through various stages, and I've spoken to thousands of people who have reached remission. And a lot of people believe that they're cured. Good. Hopefully you're going to be in a remitted state for the rest of your life. And then you need to be careful, because then something of stress can occur. A pandemic can occur, a relationship challenge, a death, a financial struggle. All of a sudden, as the stress increases, then, the bacteria from the Lyme and the parasites from the co-infections begin to reemerge. And what people need to know is that it's real. It's not like, it's funny. I met you via Facebook. I've met so many people on Facebook groups in Lyme. There's close to 1,000 Facebook groups for people with Lyme disease trying to help each other, crowd curing. I have this problem. What would you do? I have this problem. Some of these groups, Heather, have tens of thousands of people. There's no Facebook groups for people with broken ankles. There's no disputing. No one says to you, oh, you don't have a broken ankle, you're faking it. Every doctor on the planet, from Sydney, Australia to Siberia to Sacramento, California, they're going to take an x-ray. They're going to put you in a cast for 6 weeks, or a boot. And they're going to sit you on your butt and say, stay off it. And then at the 6th week, we're going to do 2 weeks of rehab. Everyone agrees. There's no communities telling people what to do with a broken ankle. It's pretty clear what you need to do. With Lyme, I monitor the groups because I have a lot of friends now. And because of my podcast, I want to stay on top of this. Every day there's 5 or 6 new things. I tried this and this, but it doesn't work. And here's the other problem. You'll get somebody who will reply with, I also tried that treatment, it saved my life. And then you get the next comment, I treated, it didn't do anything for me. And the next one, it was the best thing I ever did. Then the next one, doesn't work, don't do it. So it really is a disease world with such confusion and morass.
Well, it's a very individualized approach, and that's why I do things the way that I do things, because everyone, like I said, depending on how long they've had it, what co-infections, what genetics they have, like there's so many other components. It's never just Lyme, and I'm constantly saying it's never just Lyme. And like you had brought up, during COVID, we really saw a spike of that stressor, right, of that virus unleashing a bunch of dormant stuff that our immune system normally was keep in check, EBV and Lyme disease and stuff like that. So yes, stress is a very real factor that most people still, it cracks me up. Your doctor will say, well, lower your stress. And then I remember asking them, well, how do I do that? And they're like, I don't know, pick up a hobby, and it just drove me crazy. I'm like, wait, you're telling me that stress is like the number one thing I need, but you can't give me any what? Like, yeah, so that's huge that it is real. And so how do you, because I know like with my ex-husband, he was like, because those of us that are sick don't look sick, right? right? I looked just like I did now, like I do
Yeah.
now. And he was like, I just couldn't understand what was wrong with you. You just couldn't seem to handle life, was his thing. And, it just kind of, it still just blows my mind that somebody that was struggling that much, that you wouldn't think that there's something deeper there, right? They just kind of assume that they're crazy, right? And dismiss them and move on, So what are, again, some little more tips, and like, how do you support people?
Well, you know what? It's not just you think, they're just crazy because, they look fine. You may not know, for example, whenever I would see a particular person stressed, I would say, okay, just go take it easy, go upstairs and relax, if you will. What I've come to learn from the thousands of people like you that I've spoken to is that the fatigue that you get with Lyme, it's not just, hey, I had a bad day, I'm going to sit on the couch and watch TV for 3 hours, drink a beer, type of a thing. It's 3 days in bed type of fatigue that you can't even move to your left, right? So the fatigue I've heard is unbearable. So understand that, understand that these symptoms are not just like, you need a couple days, for R&R, right? During the whole pandemic, people were talking about things like, take a mental health day. We've all been looking at Zoom all day long for 5 days in a row. We're working from 7 to 7. Go meditate for 15 minutes. I'm a big believer in meditation and mindfulness. You and I have talked about it, but when the bacteria is in your body and it's moving into your brain and it's doing things up there, you can meditate all day long. You can meditate all month. It's a real thing that's happening to you. So I would say, for the people, you have to, understand this. If you're listening to this podcast, good for you for showing somebody that you love them. Read my book, subscribe to my podcast, subscribe to your podcast, talk to people, ask them real hard questions, go to the doctors. I'll give you an example. I did a interview um, with a highly decorated military professional, someone who was at the top of the game. I'll tell you her name. Her name was Nicole Malik. Nicole.
Yeah.
Yep, Nicole Malakowski. She was a jet pilot in the Navy, the Air Force, and she got Lyme disease, and she went through a lot of the same processes that we've spoken about. She went to the Mayo Clinic. She went all over the place. Finally, she went to a doctor. It was a peer of hers in the Navy, and she knew what was going to happen. The doctor looked at her, took her by the hand, and said, "You've been high performing in a man's world for a long time. Maybe this is your body telling you it's time to retire." And she said she knew it was going to happen. She also said if she had gone to the doctors with her husband, that she felt she would have been treated completely differently.
Mm.
So if you're a man listening to this and your spouse goes to the doctors by herself, take an afternoon off, go to the doctor, listen and pay attention, take some ownership of what your spouse is going through, for better or for worse.
Right.
Sickness and in health, my friends.
Right.
And there's that. And also pick up some of the chores. I do a chapter in the book where I say things like, cook dinner, take the kids. I've met so many women, Heather, I haven't been on women, but women who were so fatigued and exhausted and whatever it was that they couldn't get out of bed and they had to miss PTA meetings, and it would tear them apart that they were a horrible mother or a horrible spouse because they couldn't go to the PTA meetings. Now, if you're a man listening to this, go to the PTA meeting. Tell her it's okay. Maybe take a video camera with you and, interview the teacher so she can see something. But, take some of the responsibility. A lot of men, don't get me wrong, are very evolved, but at the same time, cook dinner, bring in dinner. Don't worry if dinner can't get cooked. And if the house is a little bit of a mess, who gives a who cares? What I'm saying?
Absolutely. Amen.
Focus on the person you love.
And sadly, I've been focusing too much on Limeys again. This is a book about the caretakers. So because we've kind of had to make our lives all about us as we're going through treatment. So what the Limeys need to know about the caretakers in their life? What are some suggestions? How do we help them help us, in a sense, right?
That's a great question. I first did the research because I realized, and I never thought of myself as a caregiver. The word never even occurred to me that there was such a thing. I had someone in my life and she had this disease. Okay. So that's a part of our relationship. Um, and I never thought of the word caregiver. I wrote the book because after I realized, gee, I need to learn more, I went to the internet. And when you type in best pizza in Denver, there's like 10 million pages, right? When you type in Lyme disease spouse, one page came up. It was an article written in 2013. And it just talked about, it was written by a Lyme survivor and how guilty she was that she wasn't a great mother, sister, aunt, spouse, friend, cousin, whatever it might have been, coworker, colleague. And I said, there needs to be something written out there. So eventually I wrote an article for LymeDisease.org, and it was called How to Be Supportive When Your Partner Has Chronic Lyme Disease. I thought that everything I was doing was for the caregiver, was for me, was for the husband, for the father, for the child, for the best friend. 80% of the people who have purchased my book, and I make the book free, by the way, the PDF of Love, Hope, Lyme has always been free for chronic Lyme survivors. Of course, it's on Amazon. I also sign copies and send them. But I thought my audience was the supporter. I've come to realize that 80% of the audience are chronic Lyme survivors who are looking for support and want to understand better ways to communicate to those that they love in their world. This is what I need. I'm not being needy. I'm not being,
Not a
whatever.
hypochondriac.
I'm not a hypochondriac. This is what I need. It could be something simple like, I need you to take care of the kids this week, or I need to be left alone so that I can just sleep. I don't need you to make me feel guilty that I need to stay in bed for the next 3 days. Um, I've met people who have Lyme who have high performing jobs. I met somebody who was a VP of one of the biggest technology brands on the planet. And she came to me and said, she was actually introduced by a friend. And we talked, and I said, how do you do this job? You're a VP of a brand that everybody listening here would know. And she said, I manage myself. I get my work done from 9 to 5. I don't do any work on weekends. And I focus primarily on my health. And I know this, I've got to meet her. Anybody watching her would say this is a high performing, high energy, healthy woman.
Well,
And she
even
has
Nicole said the same thing, the jet fighter. She's like, I've got this much time during the day where I know that I am
yes,
healthy, clear, and active. And that's when I try to get stuff done. And I don't do
yes,
anything outside of that because then I crash and burn. Luckily, I've gotten to a point where I've put all that stuff in remission and I'm just leading a
good,
regular, normal, healthy life. So I don't
great.
have to manage it that way. I do manage stress. That's a maintenance thing that everybody really needs to be doing anyway. But how awesome that we figure out ways. Like I said, we're not trying to be difficult. We're not trying to be needy. We're not trying to be a hypochondriac, right? We just know, right? We know our bodies well enough to know what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, the other thing too is I didn't know that there were comorbidities and co-infections. I just thought Lyme. Okay, Lyme means these three things, fatigue, tired, stress, whatever it might be. The various co-infections do different things. Bartonella does a different thing than Lyme disease. Babesia does a different thing than Bartonella and Lyme. So each of them need to be treated individually. And then you have the mold, like you talked about before. And then you have other types of gluten allergies that get thrown in there. I didn't realize how damaging eating gluten could be. And every once in a while I'd say, oh, just go for pizza. It's not going to hurt you that bad. Well, I've come to learn from people that, the eating a bit of gluten is going to, disallow the bacteria to die off. And that's going to put you into this type of a spiral. So you get to know the breadth of what your loved one is going through. It's not just Lyme. It's not cured in 28 days when it gets beyond the chronic stage. Most doctors probably don't know much about it, with the exception, again, of the Lyme literate medical doctors. And there are some doctors who have in certain areas. Even when I wrote my book, I said, there's a good chance that your doctor may not be familiar with the entirety of Lyme, except if they're in Connecticut. Of course, Lyme disease is named after Lyme, Connecticut. I had people who reviewed my book from Connecticut who said,
Yeah.
that even isn't the case.
Yep.
There's still tons of people in Connecticut, the home of where Lyme was originally discovered in the late 70s. It's beautiful bucolic town of Lyme, Connecticut, that they don't even necessarily believe or know about all the possible treatments. So
Absolutely nuts. So we're getting kind of close to end of time here. What are some final little nuggets that you want people to understand from a caregiver's point of view?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's not about you. There's that expression, when you have your health, you can do a million things, and when you don't have your health, you can only focus on one thing. And I heard that for years, and I was just like, oh yeah, I personally have never really had many health challenges. I'm pretty lucky. I have a lot of energy. I run a sales organization, an institute for sales professionals. So sales is about, moving forward. It's about getting past obstacles and things like grit. And sometimes when you're challenged with a chronic illness like Lyme, specifically Lyme, you can't push through. You need to find ways to remove the stress from your life. So I've heard a lot of people who say things like, you can do it, push through another day. Yeah, you have to make it through another day, but pushing through another day, that's really, really hard to do. But at the same time, I also want to say this, in the I think chapter 15 of my book, I talk about the possibility that you can still have an amazing life. Lyme is a challenge, like we're talking about. We've talked about a lot of the challenges. I like to tell people, Heather, right now, that it's a ridiculous disease that no human should have to endure. I believe that fully. And we can talk about spirituality at a different point about it. But at the same time, when you get into remission, or if you pace yourself, if you understand, how to live within the bounds of what it means to have Lyme, there's no reason why you can't have love, you can't have fulfillment, you can't achieve things. Yeah, I just looked at someone who traveled around the world with chronic Lyme disease, and they planned the trip accordingly. They didn't climb Mount Everest when they got to Nepal. They I don't think they went to Nepal, but they planned the trip accordingly. And she told me it was a beautiful, fun experience. So you can live life. You just need to understand that the person that you're supporting has different challenges than you do to continue through.
Absolutely. Beautifully put.
Thanks.
And so this is the shameless plug time of the show. So where can people find out more about you, about your book?
Yeah, again, it's called Love, Hope, Lyme. Like I mentioned, I've given out over 1,000 free PDFs. Anybody who's a chronic Lyme survivor, easiest way to reach me is either through Facebook, or they can reach me through LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn pretty frequently. I have the podcast, the Love, Hope, Lyme podcast. It's on YouTube, and it's also available wherever you get your podcast. And Heather, I just want to acknowledge you again. I met you when I was beginning of this journey. We had a couple of conversations. I know what you've been through. You were very honest with me. And then on my podcast, you were very clear in your journey and what you went through. And I believe what you're doing for not just people with Lyme disease, but people who are looking to optimize their health and their life is quite remarkable. And I just want to let you know how proud I am of you.
Aw, thank you. You make me blush. Um, Took me off guard. I don't think I've ever had anybody thank me before, so I appreciate that. Anywho, back on track. Make sure to also go to wearenikki.com /podcast, enter in BioBeats for 10% off. And because we really love our customers and as a way of showing our appreciation, we want to give away a Nikki on each episode.
Wow.
Now it's not a Nikki plus Lyme, that's the Nikki base model, because we are on Lyme Disease Awareness Month. I just wanted to make that differentiation. But there's a lot of amazing things that can happen with even the base model if you've got Lyme. So make sure to go find the show notes, figure out how to enter to win. Good luck, and thank you for joining us today. Have a healthy day. Thank you, Fred.
Hi, my name's Stephen Davis, founder and developer of Nikki, a personal frequency delivery system. This wearable is designed to deliver frequencies into the body to speed recovery from Lyme disease. Our Lyme suite of frequencies are the newest version of our Lyme recovery program. Thousands of Lyme sufferers, which include my family, use the Lyme daily to overcome Lyme disease. Today, I'm proud to announce a new suite of Lyme frequency sets that are going to be focused on co-infections. Nikki is loaded with Lyme Daily, which deals with the Lyme disease, plus 9 additional frequency sets designed to address your worst co-infection symptoms. Those frequency sets include bacteria and virus, detox, emotional balance, gut health, histamine, mold and fungal, Lyme sleep, pain and stress. and we know that those are going to be well received from people with Lyme disease. We are passionate about speeding your recovery from Lyme disease. It's a terrible disease that no one should have to live with. Once you have used your Lyme Daily, then choose from the 9 frequency sets designed to offer relief from your most persistent symptoms. The key is to stick with it. Don't frequency hop until you've used the Lyme Daily. Best practice is use the other frequency sets for a minimum of 2 hours before switching to another. This is giving the frequency sets time to bring your body into balance. Good balance means good health.
There's a new word for wellness, Nikki. Nikki, the bioenergetic wearable designed to help you feel better and perform better. Other wearables just track how you're doing. Nikki is about helping you do better. Touch the Nikki screen to choose the frequency you want for what you want to do and how you want to feel. Nikki puts a personal wellness center in your hands and on your wrist. Be better. Do better. We are Nikki.com. The views, information, and opinions expressed in this content are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of FreeMedica. FreeMedica Technologies, Inc. and its employees are not responsible, nor verifies accuracy any of the information contained in the following content. The primary purpose of this content is to educate and inform. This content does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services.